Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. Cameron Tucker navigated his salvage ship through the floating wreckage, scanning for anything of value. The derelict vessel, once a grand Jacksori science cruiser, now drifted in silent pieces across the Vega asteroid belt. The Galactic Union had marked it for scrap after the mysterious accident 3 weeks prior, with all crew presumed dead. For independent salvagers like Cameron, it was an opportunity too valuable to pass up. His neural implant pinged as his scanners detected a power signature. Something still lived within the largest remnant of the ship's central hull. "Interesting," he muttered, guiding his small craft toward the signal. "Zoe, can you identify that power source?" His ship's AI responded in her calm voice. "Analysis. Indicates emergency life support systems. Minimal but functional. Consistent with containment protocols." Cameron frowned. The official report stated no survivors. He docked with the broken hull segment, magnetic clamps securing his vessel to the larger debris. The atmospheric readings showed breathable air. Inside, another anomaly that piqued his curiosity. Sealing his environment suit and checking his plasma cutter, Cameron entered through the airlock. The corridor beyond was dark, illuminated only by his helmet lamp and occasional flickering emergency lights. Most systems were dead, but something was drawing power. He followed the signal through twisted hallways. The Jacksori were known throughout the galaxy as brilliant scientists but terrible soldiers. Their technological advancements were impressive, but their ethics often questionable. The Galactic Union tolerated them for their medical breakthroughs, though rumors persisted about unsanctioned experiments. Cameron paused at a heavily reinforced door. The power signature emanated from beyond it. Unlike the other doors he'd passed, this one still had security systems online. He studied the lock mechanism, recognizing it as Jacksori design. "Zoe, connect to my neural feed. I need a bypass for this security system." "Working," Zoe replied. "Caution advised. This appears to be a high-security containment area." Cameron's neural implant tingled as Zoe fed him decryption algorithms. His fingers danced across the control panel, applying the hacking techniques he'd learned during his less reputable years before becoming a salvager. The door hissed open. The chamber beyond was dimly lit by blue emergency lights. Scientific equipment lined the walls, analysis stations, monitoring devices, and equipment Cameron couldn't identify. But it was the center of the room that froze him in place. A transparent cage stood there, glowing faintly with energy fields. Inside huddled a figure, unmistakably female, though clearly not human. Her skin had a faint lavender tint, and delicate tendrils flowed from her head where hair would be on a human. She wore nothing, and her body bore marks of various procedures and experiments. When she looked up at his entrance, Cameron's breath caught. Her eyes, large, luminous, and deep violet, held intelligence and fear in equal measure. And tears that streamed down her face, catching the blue emergency lights like falling stars. "Gods," Cameron whispered, approaching slowly. The alien girl pressed herself against the far side of her cage, trembling. Her fear was palpable. Cameron held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." He knew she probably couldn't understand him, but hoped his tone might convey his intent. Her gaze fixed on him, assessing, calculating. Then she pointed to a nearby console. Cameron approached it cautiously, noting the Jacksori symbols. "Zoe, translation. Please." "Subject containment controls," Zoe provided through his neural implant. "Subject designation, specimen 11. Species, Lumidian. Status, ongoing experimental protocols." Cameron looked back at the captive alien girl. Her tears continued to fall, but a tiny spark of something new appeared in her eyes. Hope. The cage's energy field hummed with a subtle vibration that made Cameron's teeth ache. He studied the control console, disgusted by what he found. The Jacksori hadn't just been experimenting on the Lumidian girl, they'd been systematically harvesting biological materials from her for months. According to the logs, Lumidians possessed remarkable regenerative capabilities, explaining how she'd survived such extensive sampling. "This is barbaric," Cameron muttered, scrolling through procedure records. Zoe, can we safely deactivate the containment field? Analyzing, Zoe replied through his neural implant. Yes, but there appears to be a biometric lock. You'll need authorization. Cameron glanced back at the alien girl. She watched him intently, her violet eyes tracking his every movement. Despite her fear, intelligence shone behind those eyes, an intelligence that recognized he wasn't one of her captors. We'll have to do this the old-fashioned way, he said, unslinging his plasma cutter. Zoe, identify the field generator. Following Zoe's guidance, Cameron located the primary power coupling beneath the console. With precision born from years of salvage work, he severed the connection. The cage's energy field flickered, then vanished with a dying hum. The alien girl didn't move immediately. She remained huddled in the corner, watching Cameron with wary eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his helmet, revealing his human face. He wanted her to see him, to know he wasn't Jacksori. "My name is Cameron," he said softly, tapping his chest. "I want to help you." She tilted her head, her tendrils rippling with what might have been curiosity. Cautiously, she uncurled from her defensive position, revealing more of the surgical marks across her body. Cameron averted his eyes respectfully and shrugged off his outer jacket, holding it out to her. After a moment's hesitation, she reached for it. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Cameron felt a strange electrical sensation at the contact. Her skin was smoother than it looked, warm to the touch. She wrapped the jacket around herself, then took a tentative step out of the cage. Her legs buckled immediately. Whether from weakness or from the ship's lower gravity, Cameron couldn't tell. He moved forward instinctively to steady her, but stopped himself, not wanting to frighten her with sudden movements. Instead, he knelt and extended his hand, palm up. An offer, not a demand. The Lumidian studied his hand for several long seconds. Then, with deliberate care, she placed her smaller hand in his. The same electrical tingle passed between them, stronger this time. Her tendrils glowed faintly at their tips. "Let's get you out of here," Cameron said, helping her to stand. A sudden alarm blared through the chamber, startling them both. Red warning lights flashed along the walls. "Cameron," Zoe's voice came urgently through his neural implant. "The wreckage is becoming unstable. Structural integrity failing in multiple sections. We need to evacuate immediately." The ship groaned. Around them, as if emphasizing Zoe's warning. The Lumidian girl gripped Cameron's hand tighter, fear returning to her eyes. "We're leaving," he assured her, tucking his helmet under his arm. "Can you walk?" She took an experimental step, then another, growing steadier. She nodded. Cameron guided her toward the door, supporting her with a gentle hand at her elbow. The corridor beyond was tilting noticeably now, the artificial gravity beginning to fail as power systems deteriorated. "Zoe, plot the fastest route back to our ship." A glowing path appeared in his neural display. Cameron followed it, keeping his pace measured for his companion's benefit. The Lumidian matched his stride, her natural grace returning with each step. The Yamashai had nearly reached the junction leading to his docking port when a massive shudder ran through the wreckage. Metal screamed as pressurized compartments began to rupture. "Run!" Cameron urged, no longer concerned about frightening the alien girl. Understanding transcended language. She broke into a sprint alongside him as the corridor behind them started to decompress. The decompression alarm shrieked through the corridor as Cameron and the Lumidian girl raced toward his ship. Behind them, emergency bulkheads slammed down in sequence, barely containing the catastrophic failure cascading through the wreckage. Cameron could feel the deck plates trembling beneath his boots. The entire section was coming apart. "Zoe, prepare for emergency departure," he commanded through his neural link. "Warm up the engines." "Engines online," Zoe confirmed. Warning: multiple gravitational anomalies detected in the debris field. The Jacksori vessel's experimental drive core appears to be destabilizing. Perfect. Not only was he fleeing a disintegrating wreck, but now he had to worry about gravity distortions tearing his ship apart. The Lumidian girl kept pace with surprising agility despite her ordeal. Her tendrils streamed behind her, glowing brighter with the exertion. When they reached a section where the floor had buckled, she leapt over the obstacle with a dancer's grace. Cameron scrambled less elegantly after her, impressed despite their dire circumstances. They turned the final corner to the docking port. Through the viewport, Cameron could see his salvage ship, the North Star, waiting like a faithful companion. Just 20 meters to safety. A violent tremor shook the corridor. Metal screeched as support beams twisted. The Lumidian stumbled, falling to her knees. Cameron pulled her up, half carrying her as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Almost. There, he encouraged. Though he knew she couldn't understand his words, the airlock to his ship beckoned tantalizingly close. Another tremor hit, stronger than the last. Behind them, a bulkhead tore free, spinning down the corridor like a massive throwing disc. Cameron pushed the alien girl toward the airlock, shielding her with his body as the debris missed them by centimeters. They tumbled through the airlock together. Cameron slammed his palm against the emergency close control, and the outer doors sealed shut with hydraulic finality. "Zoe, disengage docking clamps," he ordered, guiding the still shaking Lumidian toward the cockpit. "Get us clear of the wreckage." "Docking clamps released," Zoe reported, executing emergency departure protocol. The North Star pulled away from the dying Jaxori vessel, thrusters firing in carefully calculated bursts. Through the view screen, Cameron watched as the section they'd just evacuated crumpled in on itself like paper in a fist. The Lumidian stood transfixed by the spectacle, her violet eyes reflecting the destruction of her prison. Cameron couldn't read her alien expression, but her tendrils had darkened to a deep indigo, undulating slowly. "Gravity anomaly approaching," Zoe warned. "Brace for turbulence." Cameron grabbed a handrail with one hand and the Lumidian's arm with the other, anchoring them both as the ship bucked violently. The alien girl clutched his jacket tighter around herself, her other hand finding his shoulder for stability. Outside, space itself seemed to ripple as the Jaxori experimental drive finally failed. A sphere of distorted space-time expanded outward, warping light around its edges. The North Star's engines strained against the pull. "Divert all auxiliary power to engines," Cameron commanded. "Get us beyond the anomaly's reach." The ship's engines roared in response, vibrating through the deck plates. The stars outside stretched and twisted as they accelerated away from the intensifying gravity well. For several heart-pounding moments, Cameron feared they wouldn't make it. Then, with a final surge of power, the North Star broke free. The view screen normalized as they cleared the anomaly's influence. Behind them, the remains of the Jaxori vessel imploded, collapsing into a short-lived gravitational singularity that winked out of existence moments later. Silence fell over the cockpit. Cameron released his white-knuckled grip on the handrail, exhaling slowly. The Lumidian girl remained standing beside him, her gaze now fixed on him rather than the view screen. Her tendrils had lightened to a soft lavender, gently waving as if in a breeze. "We made it," Cameron said, offering her a weary smile. The alien girl studied his expression. Then, hesitantly, she mimicked his smile, a universal gesture that transcended their biological differences. It transformed her face, revealing a beauty that even her tears and trauma couldn't diminish. "Zoe, set course for the nearest neutral station," Cameron instructed, "and scan our guest for any immediate medical needs." As the ship's systems hummed around them, carrying them away from danger, Cameron wondered just what he had gotten himself into. But looking at the Lumidian's tentative smile, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. The medical scanner hummed softly as it passed over the Lumidian girl's body. She sat rigidly on the examination table in the North Star's small medical bay, her violet eyes tracking the device with suspicious wariness. Cameron couldn't blame her. After what she'd endured, any medical equipment would trigger unpleasant associations. "Almost done," he said gently, though he knew she couldn't understand him. The tone seemed to help nonetheless. Her tendrils relaxed somewhat from their tense, compressed state. "Scan complete," Zoe announced. "Subject shows evidence of extensive tissue sampling and experimental procedures, but no immediate life-threatening conditions. Remarkable cellular regeneration in progress. Lumidian physiology appears to prioritize healing over scarring." Cameron nodded, studying the holographic readout. Even without medical training, he could see the evidence of what she'd endured, bright. Spots marking incision sites, tissue extractions and foreign material implantations that her body was slowly rejecting. "Is there anything we can do to help her recovery?" he asked. "Increased caloric intake would support regeneration," Zoe advised. "And her species appears to absorb certain wavelengths of light through both skin and tendrils for supplementary energy. I would recommend exposure to full-spectrum illumination." Cameron adjusted the medical bay lighting accordingly. The Lumidian's tendrils immediately responded, unfurling slightly and lightening to a softer shade of lavender. She looked up at the light source, then at Cameron, a flicker of gratitude crossing her alien features. "You're welcome," he said, smiling. "Now for the hard part, figuring out how to communicate." The universal translators that facilitated commerce across the Galactic Union were calibrated for known species. The Lumidians, apparently, weren't among them. If Cameron recalled correctly, they hailed from an isolated system beyond Union space, rarely encountered and poorly understood. Zoe accessed xenolinguistic protocols. Let's start with basics. A holographic interface appeared between them. Cameron pointed to himself. "Cameron," he said clearly, then pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. The Lumidian girl hesitated. Her tendrils swayed thoughtfully. Then she touched her chest and made a sound unlike anything Cameron had heard before, musical and resonant, like wind through crystal. "I can't pronounce that," Cameron admitted ruefully. "Would you mind if I called you something else for now?" She tilted her head, not understanding. Cameron considered for a moment. Her tendrils reminded him of the bioluminescent anemones he'd seen while diving on his home planet. "How about Lumina?" he suggested, pointing to her again. "Lumina?" She seemed to consider this, then nodded once, definitively. "Lumina," she repeated, her alien vocal structures adapting remarkably well to human phonetics. "Progress," Cameron said, grinning. Over the next hour, they built a rudimentary vocabulary using Zoe's visual interface. Simple concepts first. Water, food, sleep, yes, no. Lumina proved astonishingly quick to learn, often anticipating patterns before Cameron could explain them. Her tendrils changed colors, subtly as she concentrated, shifting through shades of purple and blue that seemed to correspond with her thought processes. When Cameron brought food, nutrient-rich protein cubes that were bland but efficiently balanced, Lumina inspected each one carefully before eating. She consumed them methodically, her expression suggesting neither enjoyment nor disgust. "Not gourmet, I know," Cameron apologized, "but they'll help you heal." Through careful pantomime and the growing lexicon in Zoe's interface, Cameron managed to convey their situation, that they were heading to a neutral station where Lumina would be safe. What he couldn't quite communicate was what would happen after that. Truth be told, he wasn't sure himself. Taking her to Union authorities seemed logical, but he'd seen enough of galactic politics to know bureaucracy might condemn her to more confinement, albeit more humane. The Jaxori had considerable influence in certain sectors. Lumina interrupted his thoughts by touching his hand lightly. The now familiar electrical tingle passed between them. She pointed to him, then to herself, then made a continuing motion. With her finger. "Together?" Cameron guessed. "You want to stay with me?" Her tendrils brightened perceptibly. "Cameron," she said clearly. "Lumina." Then she added a new word they'd practiced. "Safe." 4 days into their journey to Helios Station, the proximity alert blared through the North Star's cabin. Cameron bolted upright from his makeshift bed on the floor. He'd insisted Lumina take the cabin's only bunk and rushed to the cockpit. "Zoe, report," he commanded, sliding into the pilot's chair and scanning the displays. "Unidentified vessel on intercept course," Zoe replied. "Configuration matches Jaxori pursuit craft. They are broadcasting no identification, but have activated targeting systems." Cameron cursed under his breath. He should have expected this. The Jaxori wouldn't simply abandon their specimen after investing so much in their research. They must have tracked the energy signature when he deactivated the containment field. Lumina appeared in the cockpit doorway, her tendrils agitated and darkening with what Cameron had learned to recognize as anxiety. In the days since her rescue, she'd made remarkable progress, both in physical recovery and in communication. The universal translation matrix Zoe had been building was now functional enough for basic conversation. Danger? She asked, the translation slightly stilted but comprehensible. Yes, Cameron confirmed, not sugarcoating the situation. Jack, sorry, they're coming for you. Her tendrils coiled tightly against her head. Fear. Not go back, she said, the translation matrix unable to fully capture the desperation in her voice. Rather die. That won't happen, Cameron promised, plotting evasive coordinates. I won't let them take you. The North Star was a salvage vessel, not a warship, but Cameron hadn't survived years as an independent operator without learning a few tricks. He'd modified her engines for better performance and added shielding that wasn't strictly legal in Union space. Zoe, divert non-essential power to shields and engines. Prepare the electromagnetic pulse generator. That system is experimental, Zoe cautioned. It may disable our own systems temporarily. Better than being boarded, Cameron replied. Lumina, secure yourself, this might get rough. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, and strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. Cameron couldn't help noticing how quickly she'd adapted to human technology. Further evidence of her species' intelligence. The Jaxori vessel closed rapidly, its sleek, predatory form designed for pursuit rather than combat. A warning shot lanced past the North Star's portside, a courtesy Cameron knew wouldn't be extended twice. Attention, unregistered vessel, a cold voice announced over the comm system. You have stolen Jaxori property. Power down and prepare. To be boarded. Cameron opened a channel. This ship contains no Jaxori property, only a sentient being you illegally imprisoned and experimented on. The specimen belongs to the Jaxori Scientific Directorate, the voice replied dispassionately. Return it immediately, or face destruction. Cameron glanced at Lumina, whose expression had hardened. She was not property, not a specimen. Her eyes blazed with a determination that needed no translation. Here's my answer, Cameron said, cutting the communication and engaging the North Star's enhanced engines. The ship surged forward, veering sharply toward a dense field of metallic asteroids, remnants of an ancient mining operation. The Jaxori vessel followed, its superior engines allowing it to match their pace. They're charging weapons, Zoe warned. Wait for my mark, Cameron instructed, weaving through the asteroid field with practiced precision. The Jaxori ship followed, its pilot clearly skilled but less familiar with the treacherous environment. Cameron watched the tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. The Jaxori craft adjusted its trajectory, lining up for another shot. As it passed between two massive asteroids, exactly where Cameron wanted it, he gave the command. Now Zoe, AMP, the electromagnetic pulse fired, expanding in a sphere of invisible energy. As predicted, it temporarily disrupted the North Star's systems, plunging them into darkness. But it also caught the Jaxori vessel at the perfect moment, disabling its navigational systems. When emergency power restored the view screen seconds later, Cameron witnessed the Jaxori ship careening helplessly into an asteroid, its engines flaring, uselessly as it attempted to correct course. The collision wasn't catastrophic, but it left the pursuit craft spinning and damaged. Cameron didn't waste the opportunity. He pushed the North Star's engines to maximum, putting as much distance as possible between them and their pursuers. Beside him, Lumina's tendrils had lightened to an almost white lavender, a color he hadn't seen before. Her expression was complex, combining relief, vindication, and something that might have been admiration. You fought for me, she said through the translator. Cameron nodded. And I'd do it again. The North Star drifted silently in the shadow of a dormant comet. Engines powered down to minimal life support. After evading the Jaxori pursuit craft, Cameron had decided that reaching Helios Station directly was too predictable. They needed time to make repairs, reorient, and plan their next move. In the dim emergency lighting of the galley, Cameron soldered the final connections on a communications scrambler. The device, illegal in most Union jurisdictions, would mask their transmissions and provide false identification codes when they eventually resumed their journey. Lumina watched him work with rapt attention. She sat cross-legged on the opposite bench, wrapped in a thermal blanket she'd fashioned into a simple garment. During their days together, she'd revealed an almost intuitive understanding of technology, often anticipating which tool Cameron needed before he asked for it. "This will hide us," she asked. her translation now remarkably smooth after Zoe had refined the algorithm. "It will make us harder to track," Cameron clarified. "The Jaxori have resources, contacts. We can't assume they've given up." Lumina nodded, her tendrils shifting through thoughtful shades of blue. "My people would call you Riadine, one who defies walls." Cameron smiled at that. "I've been called worse." He made a final adjustment to the scrambler, then set his tools aside. "But we should talk about what happens next." Her tendrils stilled, attentive. "Helios Station is neutral territory," Cameron explained. "The Jaxori have limited influence there. You'd be safer than you are here, but it is still a cage of different walls," Lumina finished for him. Her perception continued to surprise him. She seemed to grasp concepts beyond the translator's capabilities. Cameron nodded reluctantly. "You could petition for asylum in Union space. I have contacts who might help, but the process is complicated, especially for an unregistered species." "And you?" she asked, her violet eyes fixed intently on his face. "What path calls to you after Helios?" It was a good question. Before finding Lumina, Cameron had been drifting, taking salvage jobs, keeping to himself, avoiding entanglements. The kind of life that followed natural consequences of trust, betrayed too many times. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. Lumina rose from her seat and moved to sit beside him. In the dim light, her skin had a subtle luminescence that hadn't been apparent under normal illumination. She hesitated, then extended her hand palm up, mimicking the gesture he'd made when first rescuing her. Cameron placed his hand in hers. The familiar electrical tingle flowed between them, stronger now, pleasant rather than shocking. Her tendrils extended slightly, the tips glowing more intensely. "My people communicate through touch," she explained softly. "Words are imprecise. May I show you something?" Intrigued, Cameron nodded. Lumina raised her other hand slowly, giving him time to withdraw if he wished. When he remained still, she placed her palm gently against his temple. The electrical sensation increased, spreading across his scalp in warm waves. Suddenly, Cameron wasn't seeing the galley anymore. Images flowed into his mind, not like projected pictures, but like memories he'd always had, yet was only now recalling. He saw a world of towering crystal formations that sang in the wind. Lumidians moving among them, their tendrils flowing in complex patterns that conveyed meanings beyond words. A society built on shared experience, rather than spoken language. Then darker images, a Jaxori science vessel appearing in their skies, the community's elders approaching in peace, offering greeting, the betrayal as stun fields activated. Lumina, younger but recognizable, being separated from others. The beginning of her captivity. The connection broke, leaving Cameron breathless. Lumina withdrew her hand from his temple, though she continued holding his other hand. "You're a telepath," Cameron said with quiet awe. "Not as you understand it," she corrected. "We share experiences, memories, emotions, not thoughts. Words remain private." Cameron absorbed this revelation. "Those crystal structures on your world, they amplified your abilities." She nodded. "They are the anchors of our collective memory. Without them, my range is limited to touch." Her expression grew troubled. "The Jaxori wanted our ability. They took samples, tried to replicate it artificially." "That's why they kept you alive," Cameron realized. "Your regenerative capabilities meant they could harvest tissue repeatedly." "Yes." Her tendrils darkened momentarily, then lightened again. "But that connection you felt, it is sacred to my people. Given freely, never taken. You responded strongly, more than most non-Lumidians could." Cameron considered this. The connection had felt natural, almost familiar. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lumina said with a small smile, "that perhaps our paths were meant to cross. My people believe in resonant souls, beings naturally attuned to one another across the void." Before Cameron could respond, Zoe's voice interrupted from the overhead speakers. "Long-range scanners detecting multiple vessels entering the system. Configuration suggests Jaxori enforcement fleet." The moment broken, Cameron released Lumina's hand and moved quickly to the cockpit. The tactical display confirmed Zoe's report. 5 ships moving in formation, conducting a systematic sweep of the sector. "They're not giving up," he muttered. Lumina joined him, studying the display. "They fear what I know, what I could tell. Others about their violations of Union research protocols." Cameron made a decision. "Zoe, plot a course away from Helios Station. Instead, set coordinates for the verdant expanse." "The expanse is unmapped territory," Zoe cautioned. "Outside Union jurisdiction." "Exactly," Cameron replied. "And home to several independent colonies who have no love for the Jaxori." He turned to Lumina. "I know someone there who specializes in helping people disappear. It's not as comfortable as Helios, but—" Lumina's tendrils brightened with a new color, a warm gold Cameron hadn't seen before. "You would continue to help me for as long as you need," he promised. "If you want." Her answer came not in words, but in the gentle touch of her hand against his, sharing a feeling of gratitude that required no translation. The verdant expanse lived up to its name. Viewed from the North Star's approach vector, the star system appeared as a sprawling nebula of emerald and azure gases, punctuated by scattered planetoids and asteroid habitats. Unlike the regimented order of Union space, ships moved through irregular patterns here, independent vessels with no allegiance except to their own interests. "Your friend lives here?" Lumina asked, her tendrils shifting curiously as she studied the viewport display. "Marlowe operates a trading post on Freehold," Cameron explained, indicating a moderate-sized asteroid habitat near the system's edge. "Former Union intelligence. She helps people with complicated situations." The North Star's communication array pinged with an incoming transmission. "Speaking of which," Cameron muttered, accepting the call. A weathered human face appeared on the screen, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Tucker," she said without preamble, "your identification codes are outdated, sloppy." "Good to see you too, Marlowe," Cameron replied dryly. "Been busy lately." "So I hear." Her gaze shifted to Lumina, visible behind Cameron's shoulder. "That your Lumidian companion the Jaxori have placed a discreetly enormous bounty on?" Cameron tensed. "News travels fast. Information is currency out here." Marlowe's expression remained neutral. "Mind explaining why I shouldn't collect that bounty?" Before Cameron could respond, Lumina stepped forward. "Because you were once captive too," she said calmly, "on Tarsis Prime. The scars on your mind still echo with it." Marlowe's composed facade cracked momentarily, genuine surprise flashing across her features. "How could you possibly know that?" "My people perceive emotional imprints," Lumina explained. "Yours reaches across the connection. Pain recognized by pain, a heavy silence hung on the communication channel. Finally, Marlowe nodded once sharply. "Docking Bay 4, use the service entrance, and Tucker," her eyes narrowed, "bring your scrambler tech. We need to talk." The screen went dark. "That was risky," Cameron said, glancing at Lumina. "Marlowe doesn't like feeling exposed." "Truth creates bridges where deception builds walls," Lumina replied simply. "She needed to see me as a person, not cargo." Cameron nodded thoughtfully as he guided the North Star toward the designated docking bay. In their weeks of travel together, he'd come to respect Lumina's insights. Her perception went beyond mere empathy. She seemed to understand emotional currents that humans often missed. Despite cultural differences, Freehold's exterior bristled with communications arrays and defensive turrets, the latter officially for asteroid deflection, but clearly designed for more immediate threats. The docking procedure went smoothly, with none of the usual identification challenges Cameron expected. Marlowe had cleared their path. They followed her instructions, using service corridors to reach a nondescript door marked only with a faded glyph that Cameron recognized as an old smuggler's sign for safe haven. The door slid open at their approach. Marlowe's office belied its humble exterior. Inside, advanced communication equipment lined the walls, multiple screens displaying data feeds from across the sector. Marlowe herself sat behind a desk of actual wood, a luxury in space, her fingers steepled as she watched them enter. "You've caused quite the stir," she said without preamble. "The Jaxori are livid. They've filed official protests with the Union, claiming theft of proprietary research materials." "I am not property," Lumina said, her tendrils darkening slightly. "Clearly, Marlowe agreed, but they're powerful enough that such distinctions might not matter. She turned to Cameron. What exactly is your plan here, Tucker? Cameron hesitated. In truth, he'd been focused on immediate safety rather than long-term strategy. Lumina needs protection until we can expose what the Jaxori were doing. Exposure won't be enough, Marlowe countered. The Jaxori have too many friends in the scientific directorate. They'll claim it was authorized research. Then we need leverage, Cameron said. Something they want more than they want Lumina. Marlowe's expression shifted subtly. Such as? The data, Lumina interjected quietly. Both humans turned to her. They seek the connection, the sharing of consciousness. Their experiments were attempts to isolate and replicate it. Telepathic technology would be worth billions, Marlowe mused, especially if weaponized. Which is impossible, Lumina continued. Our connection requires willing participation. The Jaxori never understood this. Their methods were doomed from the beginning. Cameron leaned forward. Could you prove that? Show evidence their research path is fundamentally flawed? I could, Lumina confirmed, her tendrils lightening with purpose. But more importantly, I know what they truly seek. Which is, Marlowe prompted. The location of my homeworld, Lumina said. I was not randomly captured. The Jaxori found references to Lumidian abilities in ancient texts. They sought us deliberately, but only found our outpost. They do not know the coordinates of our actual world. Cameron exchanged glances with Marlowe. This changed everything. If the Jaxori wanted Lumina, not just for research, but for the location of an entire planet of potential test subjects, we need to warn your people, he said decisively. Lumina's tendrils shifted through complex patterns. Yes, but first, we must ensure the Jaxori cannot follow. They have taken something from me, a neural imprint they believe holds the coordinates. Her tendrils darkened. It does not, but they will continue hunting me until they confirm this. So, we need to make them believe you're no longer valuable to them, Marlowe concluded, her tactical mind working through the problem. Precisely. Lumina turned to Cameron. With your help, we can create false evidence, proof that my neural patterns have been permanently altered by our escape, rendering any previous imprints unusable. Cameron considered this. A deception. Truth woven into necessary illusion, Lumina corrected. My brain chemistry has indeed changed since freedom. Sharing consciousness with you accelerated the process. This revelation surprised Cameron. You never mentioned that. The changes are positive, she assured him, her tendrils brightening reassuringly. My people evolved through connection. Isolation was damaging. But connecting with you has begun the healing. Marlowe cleared her throat meaningfully. As fascinating as your neural biochemistry is, we have more immediate concerns. The Jaxori will have tracking algorithms searching for your ship's signature across the sector. She turned to one of her displays. I have contacts who can provide new identification codes, but they'll expect payment. Name the price, Cameron said without hesitation. Marlowe studied him thoughtfully. You've changed, Tucker. There was a time you wouldn't risk yourself for anyone. Cameron felt Lumina's gaze on him but didn't meet it. Marlowe wasn't wrong. Before finding Lumina, he'd lived by Salvage's creed. Take what profit you can, avoid complications, look out for yourself. Something had shifted within him, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Just tell me what they want, he said instead. Information. Marlowe's smile was razor-thin. About the Jaxori research vessel you escaped from. My contacts would find that data extremely valuable. Cameron nodded. Zoe recorded everything. She's yours. Then we have a deal. Marlowe stood. Get comfortable. This will take time to arrange. After she left, Cameron and Lumina remained in momentary silence. Finally, Lumina spoke. You offer much for someone who was once a stranger. Cameron met her violet gaze. You're not a stranger anymore. Her tendrils glowed with that warm gold color he'd come to recognize as affection. No, she agreed softly. We are not strangers at all. 6 months later, the North Star, now registered as the Aurora Seeker, approached the coordinates Lumina had provided. Cameron's hands moved confidently over the navigation controls, guiding the ship through an unmapped nebula that effectively shielded this region from Union scanners. "We're being scanned," Zoe reported. "Multiple energy signatures ahead." Lumina stood beside Cameron in the cockpit, no longer the frightened captive he'd found in a cage. She wore a simple jumpsuit adapted for her physiology, and her tendrils flowed freely around her head, shimmering with anticipation. The surgical marks from her captivity had faded to almost nothing, testament to her species' remarkable healing abilities. "They're cautious," she explained. "Since the Jaxori found our outpost, security protocols have intensified." Their plan had worked better than expected. Using Marlowe's contacts, they'd spread convincing evidence that Lumina's neural pathways had been irreparably altered during her escape, rendering any information the Jaxori had extracted useless. Additionally, falsified reports suggested she had perished during a confrontation in the verdant expanse. The Jaxori, unwilling to admit failure to their superiors, had eventually abandoned their search. The bounty remained technically active, but had dwindled in priority as new research interests captured the Directorate's attention. "Should I respond to their scan?" Cameron asked. Lumina placed her hand over his on the control panel. "Allow me." Her tendrils extended forward, their tips glowing intensely as they touched a crystalline device they'd acquired through Marlowe's network. The crystal resonated, emitting patterns of light that pulsed in complex sequences. "Identification verified," Zoe announced moments later. "We're being guided to an approach vector." The nebula thinned, revealing what lay beyond. Cameron's breath caught. Unlike the sterile efficiency of Union space stations or the haphazard construction of frontier outposts, the Lumidian habitat was a marvel of organic architecture. Crystal structures similar to those Cameron had glimpsed in their shared memory bloomed in geometric patterns around a central sphere, all interconnected by gossamer bridges that shimmered with internal light. "The Harmony Collective," Lumina said, her voice betraying emotion the translator couldn't fully capture. "My home." As they approached, smaller vessels moved to escort them, elegant craft that appeared grown rather than built, their hulls translucent in places to reveal internal, crystalline structures. "Your people are more technologically advanced than the Union believes," Cameron observed. "We advance differently," Lumina corrected, "technology serving connection rather than separation. Our greatest achievements cannot be measured by your standards." They docked at an outer crystalline pier that adjusted its shape to accommodate their vessel, a living structure responding to their presence. When the airlock cycled open, Cameron hesitated. "Are you certain they'll welcome a human?" he asked. Lumina's tendrils brightened confidently. "You rescued me from captivity. You risked your life repeatedly for my safety. Most importantly," her expression softened, "you've shared consciousness with me. That makes you kin in their eyes." Together they stepped onto Lumidian territory. The atmosphere was slightly more humid than human standard, with subtle aromas, reminiscent of ocean breezes. Gravity felt lighter, explaining Lumina's initial difficulty walking on his ship. 3 Lumidians awaited them on the pier. Though similar to Lumina in basic physiology, Cameron noticed distinctive differences in tendril patterns and skin tones ranging from pale lavender to deep indigo. Their garments appeared woven from living material that shifted subtly with their movements. No words were exchanged. Instead, the Lumidians extended their hands toward Lumina, palms forward. Her tendrils flared brightly as she reciprocated the gesture. For several minutes, they remained in silent communion, sharing experiences beyond Cameron's perception. Finally, the eldest appearing Lumidian, distinguished by silver-hued tendrils, turned to Cameron and spoke in perfect English. "Cameron Tucker of Earth, you have returned our daughter to us when many would have exploited her for gain." The voice was melodious, genderless. "The collective acknowledges this debt." Cameron shook his head. "There's no debt. Helping Lumina was the right thing to do." The elder's tendrils rippled with what might have been amusement, a concept perfectly aligned with our ethos, yet rarely encountered among your kind. They gestured toward the central sphere. "Please, join our welcome. gathering. A human has never set foot in our inner sanctum. As they proceeded along pathways that adjusted beneath their feet, Cameron marveled at the structure around them. Every surface seemed alive, responsive, technology so advanced it appeared magical. Lumidians they passed regarded him with open curiosity rather than suspicion. "Your people seem remarkably accepting of an outsider," Cameron noted to Lumina. "They have accessed our shared memories," she explained. "They know you as I know you." The central sphere contained a vast chamber dominated by an enormous crystal formation that rose from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of Lumidians gathered in concentric circles around it, their tendrils extended toward the crystal and each other in a living network of connection. As they entered, the assembly turned toward them. A ripple of luminescence passed through the gathered tendrils. Recognition, welcome, gratitude, emotions Cameron could somehow sense despite the absence of physical contact. The elder guided them to the base of the central crystal. "This is our memory heart, the physical repository of our collective consciousness. Through it, all Lumidians share their experiences, their knowledge, their essence." "It's beautiful," Cameron said honestly. "It is more than beauty," the elder replied. "It is our survival. When the Jaxori found our outpost, we feared extinction. Many of our kind remain in captivity. Your rescue of Lumina gives us hope that coexistence with other species remains possible." Lumina stepped forward. "I've brought warning as well. The Jaxori still seek our homeworld. Though they believe the knowledge died with me, their research continues." The elder nodded gravely. "Then we must prepare accordingly." They turned to Cameron. "You have proven yourself a friend to the Lumidian people. Few outsiders earn such trust." "I did what anyone should have done," Cameron insisted. "And yet few would have," the elder countered. "Which brings us to an important question. Their silver tendrils swayed thoughtfully. "What path calls to you now, Cameron Tucker?" The question echoed Lumina's from months ago. Cameron glanced at her, standing proud among her people, yet somehow still connected to him. In their journey together, something had formed between them, something beyond protection or gratitude, a resonance, as she had called it. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "My life before meeting Lumina was purposeless, salvaging wreckage, avoiding entanglements. I'm not eager to return to that." The elder's tendrils brightened. "Perhaps your purpose found you, rather than the reverse." They gestured. "To the memory heart. Our collective has voted to offer you a unique position, liaison between our worlds. The Union must learn of the Jaxori violations, but we cannot risk direct exposure." "You want me to be your representative?" Cameron asked, surprised. "With Lumina as your partner, should she choose this path," the elder clarified, looking to her. Lumina's tendrils glowed that now familiar gold. "My resonance with Cameron is rare and valuable. I would continue our journey together." The elder nodded. "Then it is decided. You will carry our truth to those who need to hear it, while we prepare defenses against those who would exploit us." Cameron looked at Lumina, remembering the frightened being he'd found locked in a cage, with nothing left but her tears. Now she stood transformed, strong, confident, radiant with purpose, and somehow she had transformed him too. "Together, then," he said, extending his hand as he had in that first moment of trust. Lumina placed her hand in his, the familiar, electrical tingle now a comfortable sensation that felt like coming home. Her tendrils extended gently, brushing against his temple in the lightest of touches, sharing not memories this time, but emotion, gratitude, affection, and something deeper that needed no translation. Around them, the memory heart pulsed brighter, as if acknowledging their connection. The elder's silver tendrils rippled with satisfaction. "Thus begins a new chapter in our history," they pronounced. "One where not all humans are captors, not all differences are divisions, and hope transcends the darkest captivity." As the gathering of Lumidians welcomed them into their circle, Cameron realized he had found something he hadn't known he was seeking, not just purpose, but belonging. In rescuing Lumina, he had somehow rescued himself, and on the far side of the galaxy, in laboratories still pursuing their flawed research, The Jacksori would never understand what they had truly lost. Not a specimen, not data, but the opportunity to learn the greatest lesson the Lumidians had to teach, that true connection could never be taken, only given freely, that some bonds, once formed, transcended the barriers between worlds.